Now, I mentioned before that there are a few additional attributes that you can use with images. But at this point, I should also mention that these attributes that I'm going to show you right now are generally not used in HTML5 this way. They're superseded by some CSS controls. But since we haven't made it to the CSS chapter yet, we're going to take a look at these items as attributes of the tag. Let's go back to our document. And the first thing I should do is fix my file name so that our browser can actually find the image for us. Now, the first attributes I want to go over are actually a pair of attributes. They're width and height. And what we want to do is specify the size of the image that we want to appear in our browser window. Now, first off, you'll need to actually figure out what size the image is. Most programs, like the Macintosh here, have the ability to preview the image. And if I just go into my images folder and I click on the Chinatown image, you can see that it shows me a preview, and right here I can see that it's 300 by 200 pixels. For this type of measurement, we're always going to be using pixels. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the width and height measurements in pixels to my image tag. Let's go right up here. Now remember, it doesn't matter what order we put attributes in, so I'll just put it right here at the end. I just need a space in between that and the last attribute. And we'll just type in width for the first one, equals, and quotes like we normally do. And then, of course, we'll insert into those quotes the value of 300. Now let me just move after that attribute, add a space, and we'll add in the height attribute. Again, an equal sign in quotes, and this time our value is going to be 200. And then I'll close the quotes, and we'll save our document. Now, specifying the width and height is not really going to change the way our document appears in the browser at all. In fact, if we go back and take a look, I'll refresh the browser, and you can see our picture's back, but it's displayed exactly as it was before. Now, you might think that we specify the width and height so you can scale the image, and that's actually true, but most developers don't use it that way. So just to find out why, let's try this. Let me go in and change the width and height values to something that's different than the current width and height of the image. I'll go into the width and I'll set it to, let's say, 200, and I'll go into the height and set it to 100. I'll save my settings, and we can go out to the browser and refresh. Now you can see that the image did get resized, but you might also notice when you inspect this image closer that it's distorted. First of all, it's not the right aspect ratio. But second of all, most browsers aren't the best places to resize images. So if you include a width and height attribute and it's not the original size of the image, the browser may show a lot of artifacts and the image may be really jaggy looking. Now, if we're not using this to resize the images, what are we using it for? Well, actually, the width and height help the browser render the page properly. Let's think about a page like this when the user pulls it up in the browser. Now, if we imagine that our user has an extremely slow internet connection, they're going to load everything very slowly. The first thing that they'll load, of course, is the HTML page that we've set up for them. And that's just text. Generally, HTML loads pretty fast. But images can take up a lot more space than the text files that we're working with. If we had a lot more content on the page and an image right in this section here, we can imagine that the browser would start loading the page, but once it got down to the image, if it didn't know what the size was, it would have to actually wait until the image completed downloading. Then it could figure out that we needed to save 200 pixels in this area, and only then would the browser be able to actually place the second paragraph down here below it. Now, our browsers are pretty fast, but this little technique right here can make your site seem even faster to the user, because even though your page and your content isn't downloading any faster from the server, it appears faster in the browser and is rendered, since the browser doesn't have to wait to figure out how big images are. So let's go back to our document and let's put the correct size back in here. I'll go back to 300 by 200. Of course, if I save the page and I refresh, we can see that our image is back to the undistorted one that we started with. Now, the next attribute is also one that we'll be using CSS to define in our real sites. But for now, we're also going to use the attribute structure to try it out. And that attribute is align. Now, images are interesting when it comes to alignment. We actually have several ways to align, but only one command. Now, the first way I want to use align is in a vertical direction. I'm going to go down to my Chapter 4 folder, and inside the images folder, we've got another one that I wanted to work with called Market Streetcar. Now, we know we're going to need the width and height for this, so let me scroll down a little bit, and I can see the dimensions right here. Now, of course, if you can't use a preview to see the dimensions, You can use just about any image application you find. Just open up the image and look for the pixel dimensions there. I'll go back over to our document, and I'm going to go down to this paragraph where we're talking about a restored 1950s Market Street car, and let's add the image right in front of that. I'll need an image tag, img. Of course, we need a source attribute, src, equals in quotes, and then the path to our image. It starts out with images because it's in the images folder. We need a slash, and then we're going to add market-street-car.jpg. I'll close my quotes, end that tag, and remember we're going to use a self-closer on this one. And we did look up the width and height, so let's go ahead and add that as well. The width is 200 pixels, is 150 pixels. Now let's save our changes to our document, and let's go see what it looks like. As expected, we've got another image down here, and since we added it into the paragraph right before the text, you can see that it actually appears right before the text. In this case, I don't have a space between the image and the text, and that's simply because I don't have a space between the tag and the text. So I'll go ahead and add a space in here, save my page, and when we refresh again, you'll see that I have now that additional space there. Also notice that the text is aligned at the bottom, so this is acting like a really big, tall piece of text right in line with the smaller text next to it. Now the first alignment setting we wanted to talk about was vertical. But what's interesting is we're not really moving the image itself. When we talk about using the align attribute, we can think of it as aligning the text next to the picture. Now I'll go back to my document and we'll add the align attribute in here at the end. Of course, it's going to be align equals with quotes, and we have several values that are going to be accepted here. The vertical ones that I'm talking about are top, middle, and bottom. I'm going to try the bottom one first, which is the least interesting because that's the default value. If we save and refresh our page, we'll notice no change whatsoever because it was already using bottom alignment. So let's go back and try out another. I'll select the bottom value and just change that to top, save our change, and we'll go back out to our browser and refresh. And now you'll notice that the text has moved. The image itself hasn't moved at all, but the text near the image has now aligned on the top line instead of on the bottom line. Now let's try out the last value here for verticals. That would be middle. Again, I'll save my changes to the document. We'll refresh our browser, and there you can see that the text is now aligned for the middle. This will work for any image, but it wouldn't be really interesting for our image up here at the top because there's no text next to it. So we wouldn't see any change at all if we used it there. Now, of course, to finish off our discussion about align, we want to try the horizontal alignments. So let's do that for this upper image here at the top. I'll go back over to my document. And what I'm going to do first is grab that image tag, the whole thing, and I'm going to put it back into the paragraph where we had it to start with. I'll save and refresh the page just so we know where we're starting from. And once again, I've got the image here in line with the first line of that paragraph. Now let's try our alignment attribute. I'll go down to the end of that tag. I'll add an align equals quotes. And this time we're going to use left and right. Now, the image is already kind of pushed to the left side of the page, but if I specify a left alignment, we'll save our change, and we'll go out and refresh the browser. You'll notice that not only is the page on the left-hand side, but it is to the left of all the text, and the text has floated up to fill that space in between. We can go over and try this again. Let's try a right alignment. Again, I'll save my change. We'll go back out and refresh our browser, and you can see that the image this time has shifted over to the right, and now the text is floated up on the other side to fill up that space. When we use this technique in CSS, it's called a float because we have items floating around other items. And we'll be exploring this a lot more in that chapter. But for right now, you'll see that you can move the image around and work on placement even when we're just using basic HTML.